So before we start our service, just a couple quick business pieces for those who've not been here before. Bathrooms are that way. Exits are that way. If you walk out that way and try and go to the bathroom, you're going to be really cold. If you walk out this way, we ask that when you leave the sanctuary, make sure the door closes behind you. So there's an usher that'll be there at this front door, and they'll let you back in when you come back from the hallway. So hopefully you got a prayer book. It should say Shabbat on the binding, and we'll get and please keep your masks on. If you need a mask break, you can go. Then you can go. If you go out those doors, you can't get back in. So go out the front doors if you need to get a breath of different air. But while we're in here, we keep our masks on. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to our guests, to those who are joining us online, to those who are joining us here in person. It's our Interfaith Youth Shabbat. I'm Rabbi Brown. This is Cantor Fromson, and Eli is our accompanist. We welcome everybody who's here, who's joining us at home or here in person. We use the Mishkan Tefillah prayer book. Tonight's service is just slightly different. We try to keep it as typical as for our guests especially, so that you get to experience a typical Friday night Shabbat service at Temple Israel. But we will offer a few instructions. So you'll notice, those of you who've never used this prayer book before, don't try and open it like you open Harry Potter. It doesn't work that way. Its magic begins in the back. What we call the back is the front. You'll see this is the front of the book. Hebrew reads right to left, and so do books that have Hebrew in them. So we'll utilize our prayer book that way. And you'll also notice that on most pages, the way that this prayer book works, I'm going to try and find a good example that you can pretend to see from up here. Most of the prayers in this prayer book, the prayer pages are cut into sort of 4 quadrants. So in the 4 quadrants, the top right is the traditional prayer, and as you move through the pages, it's the same prayer, but in more creative forms. So usually it's traditional top right, translation bottom right, creative version 1 top left, creative version 2 bottom left. So often we will only do one prayer, not always, because nothing is straightforward in Judaism, as you'll find. Not always, but most of the time we do one prayer per bifolded page. And so we'll announce page numbers tonight. And 2 last things. One is that we often, normally this service has just thousands and thousands of people. We can't even fit in this space. We would like to believe, because people like to learn and experience different cultures, and they like to ask questions, but we also know because normally we have tons and tons of donuts at the end of the service, and people like free donuts. So unfortunately, we can't have thousands of people, and we can't have donuts tonight. We invite you back in future years to get your rain check on a donut. You'll get double portion in the future. But secondly, we believe deeply in the power of asking questions, and that there is no such thing as a bad question, except for the one that you don't have the courage to ask. And so tonight, we'll take time at the end of our service. We've saved some time for people to ask any questions that they have about Judaism. And since we're in a virtual world, those who would like to ask questions as we're making our way at any time during the service, this will be the only time probably that we invite you to take out your phones and participate in our service this way. but especially for those who are joining us virtually, if you go to facebook.com/Temple Israel Akron, you will find our Facebook page with our live stream. Some of you are already on our live stream on Facebook. On the live stream Facebook page, you can type in any questions you have at any time during the service, and Lauren Trexler, our educator, is monitoring the questions, and we'll turn to her for any online questions that people have at the end of the service. So even if you're here or at home, you can type your questions in that way. For those who are here, you can ask your questions the good old-fashioned way in person also. So we just want to make sure that you know we love questions, and we hope you'll ask whatever questions you have. So we'll begin our service by lighting our candles, our Shabbat candles. The prayer is found on page 2 in our prayer books. We invite you to find that page and to enjoy the beginning of our Shabbat. And also I'll say, please join with us in singing, even if you don't know the words. We encourage you to find your way to pray with us as we begin Shabbat together. Page 2 in our prayer books.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom. You can respond Shabbat Shalom. It's okay to say that. Thank you. It means that we want this to be a moment of peace, a moment of rest, a moment of prayer, and a moment to be together. We begin our Shabbat service with prayers that remind us to do just that. The first, page 10 in our prayer book, Hine ma tov u'ma na'im, in Hebrew, we translate that to be how good it is and how sweet it is that we are together. And so we start with those words to give thanks for the fact that we can be together in all the ways we can be together today. Page 10 in our prayer books.
Hine ma tov u'ma na'im sheverachim gam yachad. 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 Sheverachim gam yachad. Sheverachim gam yachad.
Part of Shabbat is being sure that we are ready for this day, that we are able to separate this day. And so we often do that by walking back to where we were 7 days ago. So we ask you to take a moment to reflect on where you were at this time last week, all that's happened in these 6 days since that moment, the people you've spoken with, the blessings you've had, the challenges you've faced. And take a moment to lift up those moments that have been blessings that you want to carry into this day as we begin it, and the challenges that we want to let fall behind us. So take a moment before we turn to our next prayer. Reflect on your week as we prepare for Shabbat. Page 20, the words of Lecha Dodi, verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. When we get to verse 9, we welcome Shabbat into this space as though it's a bride, and so we'll stand during that last verse. We'll give you the instruction then too. Please join us on page 20 as we welcome Shabbat with joy as a bride entering her wedding.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nai Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmi'anu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad, Shemo echad, L'Shem ol tiferet v'nitchila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nai Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nai Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki hi mekor habaracha. Meirosh mikedem nasucha, Sof ma'aseh b'mashcha v'tchila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nai Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nai Shabbat nekabela. Hitorari, Ki va'orech umiuri, uri, Shir daberi, Kevod Adonai ala yechnila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nai Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nai Shabbat nekabela.
We invite you to please rise as we face the entrance to our sanctuary or the entrance to your homes as we welcome in Shabbat.
Bo'י ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובסוך חולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nai Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nai Shabbat nekabela.
Please remain standing, page 26, Hatzi Kaddish.
V'kadash Shemei Rabbah, V'yamad yivrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, V'chayechan u'v'yamechan u'chayedecha bet Yisrael. Bagala u'v'zman kariv v'yimeru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach, Ve'alamu Ami Amaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yinasi, V'yitadar v'yitali, V'yithalal, Shemei dekorash barichu. Le'elam yinkor b'chata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, damira me'ama ve'imeru Amen.
page 28, the words of the Baruch Hu. You'll notice that the pages change a little bit, the more formal writing at the top of the page to introduce our most important section of prayers. We begin by facing east, which those of you who are here are already facing that direction. And we'll begin by the cantor leading us in the first line of this prayer, and we will respond with the second line on page 28. She will bow as she says the first one, we bow as we say the second one, as our way of saying we're ready for our most important prayers. First, the prayers that define us as a people, the words that will come in a few moments of the Shema. And secondly, we'll get to the Amidah, the words that remind us how we can use our own words to say the prayers that are closest to our hearts. So page 28, we face east, and we begin by listening to the cantor and then responding.
Lai la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya la ya la la. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach HaMevorach Le'olam Va'id HaMevorach HaMevorach Le'olam Va'id.
On pages 30 and 31, we remain standing as we share our prayer to bless change in our life. This is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Do we draw back, my brother, my sister, or should we cross over? For in this hour of change and within it, we will stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Do we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv, Aravim. The words of Ahavat Olam, a prayer to embrace love in the world, page 32.
Ahavat Olam Bet Yisrael Amcha Ahavta Amcha Ahavta Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadeta Otanu limadeta Ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shachleinu Humeinu nasiach bechukecha V'nismach b'divrei Toratacha u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ahavat olam Bet Yisrael Amcha ahavta Amcha ahavta.
Pages 34 and 35, the 12 words that most define us as a people, the words of the Shema.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shri Kivud Malachutu Le'olam Va'id.
Please be seated, page 36. The words of the V'ahavta, a reminder on how we are to teach our values to our children.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
We turn to page 39 as we prepare to hear the words of a prayer called Mi Chamocha, words that, as was the case with what you just heard, what the cantor was chanting V'ahavta, as were some of you. Those are words from our Torah. We'll take our Torah out later in our service and read from the actual scroll, and it has that particular chant that goes with it. The next words we'll share are also from Torah. We read them a few weeks ago in the book of Exodus when the Israelites crossed the sea and the sea is split. It's the moment at which the Israelites realize that for the first time in over 400 years, that they actually can have some say in their own destiny, a sense of freedom, that they are no longer enslaved. In our tradition, we read the Torah from the actual scroll in which it's been handwritten on. It's one of the great honors that we have that we reserve for adults to do, and I say that because we have a number of bar and bat mitzvah kids here. If you're going to read from Torah for the first time in the next 2 years, can you stand up? All right, so we have a number of our bar and bat mitzvah students who will get to read from the Torah for the first time coming up. They're preparing right now to be able to do this great skill and be the voice of our story. And they do that because we retell our story so that we can remember the oldest values and the ways in which our people have continued to thrive in this world, having faced great fear, but also having tasted the most amazing sense of freedom after having fought for it. And so these words that mention Egypt are not referring to the Egypt of today. They are referring to the metaphorical Egypt, the ways in which each of us find ourselves in our lifetime to be enslaved by something, to be in a place that doesn't let us be who we truly are. And so we share these words. Please join with me at the top of page 39 before we hear those words from the Torah. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, and that there's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Now, these are the words from the Torah that we read a few weeks ago. Page 40. Tonight, later on, we'll read words that reflect on the moment at which Moses was on top of the mountain speaking with God. But here are the words that the Israelites are said to have shared together in song when they felt freedom for the first time. Page 40.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות עושה פלא, נורא תהילות עושה פלא. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה, זה אמרו, זה אלינו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם.
Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh.
Nora tehilot, osefele. Nora tehilot, osefele. Please
As we're
join
well
us on
into
the
the-
next page, page 42, Hashkivenu. Rabbi, you want to explain a little bit about this prayer?
Hashkivenu is our prayer as we're well into the evening, as people were often afraid of the evening, of darkness. I know nobody here ever had a fear of the dark, but I know, except the Noahs in the very back row. Both of them raised their hands immediately. Very proud to say that they both have a fear of the dark. At night, we often feel alone. We often feel that we're separated from others. We often feel that it's hard to find light in the world. And so we share the words of Hashkivenu to remind ourselves that as the world seems to get smaller, that it truly is not. It is actually continues to be a place filled with peace, filled with comfort. And these are the words, if you follow along in the English that's on the other three sections of the page, other than the Hebrew, you'll find that it offers us this reassurance that even when we can't see what's in front of us, we are still under the shelter of those who love us, of God, of a world that we hope continues to find peace. Page 42, the words of Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'ha'amidenu shamreinu l'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha. Amen. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right, O Adonai. Amen. Amen, amen. Amen, amen, amen. O Adonai.
Turn to page 46. This series of prayers that follows for the next 15 pages or so up to page 60. It's really one continuous series of prayers that is there to remind us of those who came before us, our ancestors centuries back, and to allow us to link their great work and memory into our own words of where we are in the present. And so we begin by recalling the names of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, the matriarchs and the patriarchs who began the Israelite people. And we end with a moment of silence so that our own voices can become part of our prayers this evening. Please rise, page 46, as we first ask for the ability to say these words with great strength and humility, followed by the words themselves.
Adonai, sifatai tiftach, ufi yagita hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Velohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Velohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanara, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'Nehem, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני,
Page 50.
מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומידה מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל.
Please be seated. God of goodness, page 59. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, for wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer our thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulcha na'eh lehodot. As we turn to page 60, we share this prayer followed by a moment of our own personal silent prayer. Shalom Rav is a prayer that even those of you who perhaps are having your first Jewish experience know the word shalom. It's best defined as meaning wholeness or peace. We say it to say hello and goodbye to people as we wish for them a sense of peace upon them as we see them and a sense of peace upon them as they leave. But in this case, Shalom Rav refers to this great sense of what's defined here in the prayer book as abundant peace. If you could imagine a peace that's unimaginable, things fixed that we just presume are always going to be there, things like cancer and war and hatred disappearing. That's what Shalom Rav asks us to make a part of our prayers right now. And so the cantor will lead us in the words, page 60, of this most idealistic version of prayer that we continue to offer as we hope the world one day will match the words that it gives us.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. Grant us peace all over the earth. Grant us peace all over the earth. Bless us in every season. Bless us in every moment. Bless us in every season. Bless us in every moment. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. Please take a few moments for silent meditation. Oh, say shalom, bimroma, oh, yeah, say shalom. Aleinu. Ve'yaku Yisrael, ve'yaku Yoshvei Tevel. V'maru ami, v'maru ami, v'maru ami. V'meru amin.
I'm going to preemptively answer a question that we get asked every year. Sometimes people don't have the guts to ask this question, which is, what is this elevator door that is behind us? And so it is not an elevator door. We'll show you what it is in a moment, but there's no button, and it won't take you up or down. This is our ark. Inside of our ark, we keep our Torah scrolls. As we open the ark, you'll see that there's a number of Torah scrolls that are within the ark. And one would think that each scroll is different, and you might say that. They are each different in the way that they look. But actually, the words that are in every Torah scroll, everywhere in the world, are exactly the same. Inside each of the scrolls that you'll see are what we call the Torah, or the 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books of a Christian Bible, what Christians would refer to as the Old Testament. The beginning of those, from Genesis through Deuteronomy, is written in these books, and the cantor will chant for us a section from this week's reading, which is in the 24th chapter of Exodus. Moses is on the mountain, and I'll share the translation first of what you'll hear in a moment in the Hebrew. When Moses had ascended the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain. I started too late. Sorry, let's rewind. I'll come back to that. God said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets," you remember those things, "with the teachings and the commandments which I have inscribed to instruct them." So Moses and his attendant Joshua arose, and Moses ascended the mountain of God. And to the elders he said, "Wait here for us until we return to you, for you have Aaron and Hur with you. Let anyone who has a legal matter approach them." When Moses ascended the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain. The presence of God abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it for 6 days. On the 7th day, God called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. Now the presence of God appeared in the sight of the Israelites as a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Moses went inside the cloud and ascended the mountain, and Moses remained on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And so you will hear a few words as the cantor will chant the Torah portion. We can talk a little bit later about the great skill it takes to chant the Torah portion. But you'll hear some of the words I want to point out for you. You'll hear the word Moshe, which is the word Moshe. Where's Moshe? He left. When we talk about Moshe, he leaves the room. So there is a Moshe here. It's not the same Moshe from 4,000 years ago, but he's equally as wise. You can ask him questions later. But you'll hear the name Moshe, which is Moses. You'll hear that a few times. Oh, there's Moshe. We're talking about you. See? Moses he's come down from the mountain, and Moses is here now. Correct. So you'll hear Moshe a few times. You'll hear Bnei Yisrael, which is the words for the people of Israel. So too, you'll hear in there, it might be a little hard, but the word mitzvah. Mitzvah is a commandment that was given to the Israelite people in these moments. So we'll now stand as we'll turn to page 250. We're going to skip way forward in our prayer book as we'll go to the blessings that we'll say before the reading of the Torah. And I'll open the ark. Just do your best to follow along. In a moment, you'll see Cantor Kathy will have the Torah before her on this podium, and we'll share those words I just shared with you.
Ki mitzion tetzi Torah, ki mitzion tetzi Torah, u'devar Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah. Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonai Kadosh Shemo Gadol Adonai Uneromema Shemo Yakda Lecha Adonai Hagedula Hagevura Hatiferet V'hanitzach V'haod Ki chol b'shamayim uvaretz Ki chol b'shamayim uvaretz Lecha Adonai hamamlacha V'hamit naseh lechol larush.
Please be seated. I'll invite Cantor Kathy to come find the portion, and maybe she'll explain what she's holding as she reads. We'll listen to the portion, then we'll say the blessings before and blessings after. Are those page 250? Is that wrong one?
Yep. Before we do the working on this one.
No, you want to talk about the
So this is called a yad. That's the Hebrew word for hand. And if you can't really see it since you're so far away, but it has a tiny little finger, like it looks like a pointer. And we use this because we don't want the oils of our own hands to touch the scroll. Okay?
Please,
We're going to join along on page 250 as a community, the blessing for Torah. Baruch hu et Adonai hamborach. Baruch Adonai hamborach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah. Amen. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, Ala Elai hahara vayahasham, va'etna lecha et luchot ha'even. V'hatorah v'hamitzvah, asher katarchi Lehorotam, Vayakom Moshe, Vayehoshua Misharto, Vaya'al Moshe El Har HaElohim, Va'el Hazkenim, Amar Shivulanu Vazeh, Ad Asher Nashuv Alechem, Vahine Aharon, Vachur Imachem, Miva'al Devarim, Yigash Alehem, Vaya'al Moshe el hahar, vayikas ha'anan et ha'ar. Let's all join together in the blessing for the end of the reading on page 250 at the bottom. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chaye olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
We take a moment while our Torah is out before us. As we take the strength of our oldest story, we offer some of that strength to those who are in need of healing. And so the cantor will lead us now in our prayer for healing, our Misha Berach prayer. It's found page 253. In the midst of our prayer, we'll invite anyone who would like to share the name of someone who is in need of such strength so that they can find the fullest sense of themselves. And we'll share those names as part of our prayer in the hopes that they do heal. Page 253.
Mi sheberach avotenu mekor habracha imotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
If there are names you'd like to share, please share them as I look around the room.
Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha liavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
I invite you now to rise again as we lift our Torah. We'll show the scripts to everyone as we find a connection with the words themselves. Then we'll return our Torah to the ark.
V'zot Torah asher sa Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael. Al ki Adonai b'yad Moshe. Yad elai, elai, 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 yad
Page 282, the words of Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'ateit gedula liatzer b'reishit, shelo asanu kegoyei haratot, v'lo samanu kamishpechat adama, shelo sam chalkeinu kahem, v'goroleinu kechamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, לפני מלך, מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Page 287.
ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
Please be seated. We've almost concluded our liturgical part of our service, the prayers of our service. We always close with our thoughts and prayers for those that we've lost. We mention a number of names in our tradition. First, we mention those that we've lost in this last month. Members of our congregation and family members of our congregation. And then we read a list that is a longer list, which is those who've died at this week in years prior, which can be people's parents who may have passed 40 or 50 years ago, but we continue to share their names as their children and their family remember them. And it could be people who are just now approaching the first anniversary of a loss for them. And so too, we want to offer our community support for them at this time as well. And so first we share the names of those whom we know have been lost in this last month. Iraj Yedidzion, Susie Maidenberg Shoshan, Phyllis Sugarman, William J. Stern, and Barak Amrani. We add to their names those that we've lost at this time in years past. Dr. Sidney Blum, Jean Bober, Max Boris, Molly Braunstein, Rosalind Emanuel, Moses W. First, Sophie Guerin, Ida Greenblatt, Ruth M. Harris, Max Kantrovitz, Simon Kloner, Cecilia Krondritzer, Cyril Krongold, Richard Leschen, Max Levine, Julius Lubin, Raymond Mann, Rose Mink, Robert B. Meerman, Jacob Pollack, Leon Rudnick, Saul Schachter, Manny Schlitt, Marcia K. Sensor, Shmuel Schneider, J. William Schulin, Isabel Solomon, Jacob Ludwig Stern, Samuel H. Stone, Harry Waldman, and Margaret P. Zipper. If there are names you'd like to add or names that I mispronounced, please add them. We rise once again, page 294. So we share these words to honor our loved ones and offer comfort for those who are in mourning. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah ve'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael v'gala u'v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam almei almaya Yit barak v'yishtabach v'yit pa'ar v'yit romam v'yit naseh v'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal Shemei dekudesha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechamata damiran b'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Osei shalom b'mromav huya asei shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all the world, as we say. Amen. Having given honor and blessing to those that we've loved and lost, we bless each other, page 299, with the words of the priests. It is some tradition to put your arm around each other if that's COVID comfortable for you. May God bless you and keep you. May God's light shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May you feel God's presence within you always, and may you find peace. Please be seated. We're going to take about the next 10 minutes to answer any questions. That is not what we normally do in a service. Normally, I give a sermon, which is an opportunity for people to acknowledge a sense of brilliance or to sleep. You can ask people which one they do more often. But normally we have a particular message that we share, much like ministers and imams and other religious leaders do in a service. We take a moment to learn, which is one of our greatest values in Judaism, is to study and to ask questions. On this night in our congregation, it's the tradition that we allow our guests especially, but we often find even those who are here every week still have questions. So anybody can ask a question, and we encourage you to do so. We'll take about 10 minutes to answer as many questions as we can to try and help illuminate our service and our tradition. I know one of the questions, I'm going to start with a question that we had. Did we get questions online, Lauren? Were there some? Yeah. So one of the questions that we had sent to us beforehand was around holidays. It was a great question, and I'm so glad it was asked, because the question was that we know that there are certain Christian holidays that are very important, and that we know they're on the calendar, like Christmas and Easter, but what are the important Jewish holidays? And I love this question because there's a great myth out there that Hanukkah is the most important Jewish holiday because it falls right at the time during a really important Christian holiday. And actually, Hanukkah is one of the least important holidays, but generations of Jews are very grateful for the Christian world because given that it falls during Christmas, Hanukkah has nothing to do with giving presents or putting lights on your house or celebrating publicly with parties or anything like that. We have learned from you that it's really nice to give presents and light up our houses during December. And so our kids get 8 nights of presents thanks to their Christian friends. But traditionally, Hanukkah has nothing to do with that. It's all about miracles and people overcoming religious oppression. The important holidays the most important holidays on the Jewish calendar, 2 of them come in the fall, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right next to each other. So we actually, more or less, we consider those the same holiday in some ways. They're very different days. They're 10 days apart. But you'll notice on most calendars that sometime usually in early September, mid-September, Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year. We all come together, and it's the beginning of our days of repentance. To a degree, you might compare it a little bit to Lent, as if Lent was sort of squeezed into 10 days. And then Yom Kippur, our holiest day, is a day for true repentance and really searching our soul for how we could be better people in the year to come. In the spring, we have our home holiday of Passover, usually coinciding around Easter. And that's a holiday where people have this wonderful meal called a Seder at home. And it's a bit like Thanksgiving in a way, except that it's got 15 steps to it that are very specific. So imagine a very formal Thanksgiving with a bunch of different family traditions mixed in. Every family does it a little bit differently, and it falls during Passover, which is our week of specifically doing our best to remember and even act out the exodus from Egypt and talk about freedom, and to remember to humble ourselves by eating matzah, unleavened bread. So you may see matzah. They love to sell matzah year-round. Now, those of us who eat matzah during Passover, most of us are not sure why they sell it year-round, because it was never intended to be something that tasted good. It's supposed to taste like the bread that slaves would eat on their way out, rushing out of Egypt to be free. And we're told that they ate matzah because they didn't have time to sit down and bake something that would taste good. But for some reason, it sells well throughout the year. So people, you'll see it year-round in the grocery store. But all week, we don't eat bread or anything that rises, anything that has any leavening in it. And that's what we do during Passover, and it begins with this big family meal that people often make really fun for their families. So I want to turn first to questions that we got online. Lauren's going to share. How many do we get? Do we have like a long list? Or okay, one really long question. Right.
So this is from the confirmation class at First Congregational Church in Hudson. And they're watching together. And they would like to know, what is the symbolism of facing east for the prayers that you mentioned earlier?
Wonderful. Proving that they listened and they have a question. That's good. Well, extra credit. So we face east. We faced east in Judaism because we direct our prayers towards Jerusalem. So we determined that where we are here, Jerusalem is towards the east. Israel is towards the east. Israel is a physical land today, which we're very grateful for. It's an actual state. It's one of the few times in history that the Jewish people have had a state that follows our calendar and protects our people and serves as a place in which, the only place in the world where we are not a religious minority. But the Israel that we talk about when we face east is not only the state of Israel, it's also the concept, a place that we long for. We mentioned it in our prayers, a promised land. So we turn east because we believe we face the promise of the future. And Israel has always been that symbol for us, even when it wasn't an actual state with borders, and when it wasn't actually inhabited by Jews. There have been many times where the Jewish people have been expelled from Israel. And so most of the history of the modern era, we have not had a majority population in Israel, and yet we've still faced Israel because we believe in facing opportunity and optimism and promise. So that's our promised land, and that's what we turn to face that way. Questions here? If you have a question, we have a microphone here. If you have a question, don't be bashful. Those who are new to us or not new to us, we encourage you to ask a question. We'll take a couple questions, and then we'll wrap up with a blessing. Yeah.
So besides Shabbat service, how do you, and maybe this varies from person to person, but how do you keep the Sabbath, so to speak?
Great question. How do we keep the Sabbath? It depends on the person. So the traditional answer would be that some people, I'll actually tell you two ways to think about it. So some people keep the Sabbath by not doing certain things. So they don't drive, or some people don't use electricity. Some people, the broad sense of this is don't do any work, which can be defined in lots of different ways as to what work is. Another way to look at it is you keep the Sabbath by doing certain things. So you might spend time with your family more on the Sabbath. You might eat your favorite foods. You might make sure that you spend time with friends. You sing songs. You do things that are joyous for you. So of course, that's not to say that people are either or. For most people, it's a combination of both. And it all depends on a variety of factors. There are lots of different ethnic traditions within Judaism as to how people might observe their Sabbath. One thing that is consistent is that we all observe it. It wasn't always this way. There have been attempts at some rebellious times, but they never worked. So Jews always observe the Sabbath Friday evening through Saturday evening. So if you were to go to Israel, again, where the culture is a Jewish culture that dominates the calendar, you'll find that Friday afternoon in Israel, everything starts to shut down, and the mall closes. And you can't imagine this. The mall closes on Saturday, but then it opens back up Saturday night. So people go out Saturday night in Israel to the mall or to a movie as if it's the beginning of their weekend after having it's almost like the reverse of the American experience. They have Sunday first, and then they have Saturday. So everything shuts down pretty quickly Friday. People are at home, people are with even the people who are not religious, as we would say, people who don't go to the synagogue, they still have a family day. And there's no football on Friday night or Saturday or anything. It's just time with your family. They go to parks. They spend time outside a lot because they have great weather. And then Saturday night becomes the night to go do stuff. And actually, for most people, Sunday is a work day, and becomes the first day of their week. So people do all sorts of different things. But we pray a lot. We eat a lot. We try to rest a lot. And hopefully, we accomplish some of those things. Great question. Yeah.
Thanks. Could you talk a little bit more about the scrolls? So how are they created? Are they written by hand? And then also, how do you find where you need to go in there?
Great question. So the scrolls are one of our most intricate traditions. So they're written by hand. It takes about a year to write a Torah scroll. It's written in a very specific way, missing some things and adding some things. So the things that it's missing are vowels and punctuation. And the things that it adds are some certain artistic elements that make it a little bit more of a beautiful writing. If you look in let's see, I'll tell you. I think if you were to look if you turn to page 34, 35 in your prayer books, you may remember seeing that page. That's the prayer, the Shema, which is one of our most important prayers. And that's actually words from Torah. If you look at the artistic element at the top of the page, that's how Torah script is written. So those little lines that are coming off If you look at the top, there's some little 3 lines coming off some of the letters. The words that are on the top of the page, by the way, are exactly the same as what's on the bottom of the right-hand side of the page. So you can compare sort of a Times New Roman font versus a Torah font, if you will. So the Torah font has these 3 these crowns. It's different in every Torah. That part is a little artistic depending on the scribe. But a Torah has to be written in a very, very specific way. There can be no mistakes. And some of the pieces that I'll tell you 2 pieces given our time that I'm fascinated by. So the first is they justify every column. Those of you who use the computer, you click on the little button that makes all the lines perfectly straight, and it's so easy. You go in and you just click that button, and all of a sudden the computer automatically takes your document and makes the lines perfect, like the books of the lines in a book that you would read. Well, a Torah scribe does that automatically by eye. So every column in the Torah, you saw how big that scroll was, every column is perfectly straight down the sides. And the scribe does that by estimating the length of every letter on that line and lengthening certain letters and shortening other letters so that when you look at a Torah scroll, it's straight up and down. It doesn't have these zigzags on the end. It's nice and pretty. The second is that every column begins with the same letter, the letter Vav, which if you look from the left side of the page you were on, page 35, if you look at the beautiful writing at the top, and count 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th letter from the left is the letter Vav. It looks like a little line down with a head on it. That letter is at the top of every column. So not only is the scribe making sure that the columns are justified by stretching out the letters, but he has to make sure that whatever word, and it's not like he's writing the words himself. The words are already decided. So the words match in every Torah scroll, like I told you. Every column begins with the letter Vav. So there's all this math happening in the scribe's head as the scribe is writing it. The last point I'll tell you is, which I think is the most universal lesson we can take from the Torah. The Torah is the book that eventually other Bibles were translated from, at least those 5 books. It's the oldest document of the Bible that we have. There are other books that came from other places and that were translated from other languages. But the book of Genesis was always translated from a Torah that was written with no vowels and no punctuation. So when you take out vowels and punctuation, some of you heard me say this before because it's my favorite way to describe a Torah. A Torah is written like text messaging is today. It's just consonants. See you later, right? So you don't write out the whole sentence. It's in shorthand, the whole thing. And it has no punctuation. It has no verse numbers. It has no periods. You don't know where a chapter begins or a chapter ends. So there's a book called Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. I always forget to bring it out here, but some of you may have it. Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. And if we had more time, I would quiz the kids. And I like to ask kids when they come to visit school groups, what do you think's on the cover of the book? Because you can figure it out if you think about it. Eats, Shoots, and Leaves on the cover has a panda running away, having robbed a store with a gun in its hand. Because depending on what the punctuation is, either the panda is eating shoots and leaves, or someone eats shoots and leaves as they're robbing a store. You don't know what it is unless you have punctuation to tell you. The entire Torah has no punctuation. So somebody had to figure it out. They had to figure it out because it had no vowels. They had to figure it out because it had no punctuation. They didn't know if the panda was robbing the store, if the panda was just having lunch. Which means that everything we know from Genesis through Deuteronomy, it doesn't mean that it's all a wash. It does say something in the direction of what it says. But every time you translate something, you're making an interpretation, which is what makes it fun. So when we go in and we talk about the stories of Noah and the stories of Adam and Eve and the story of today that we talked about Moses on the mountain, there's always a level of interpretation. We don't know exactly what the original intent of those words were. It's up to us to pull them out and figure them out. And so that's one of the fun parts of how we look at our text, is there's always the word, I'll close with this. The word Yisrael, Israel, means to struggle with God. We see that as a great honor. to be able to struggle with a text, to be able to learn, to be able to not know the answer, and to still work with it. That's what we try and do. And we continue to try and ask questions, to try and learn more. And we don't believe that there can be any perfect right answer because it's up to us to be a part of that answer. So we thank you all for being here, for joining us, those who joined us online. And we're sorry that we can't have normal times yet, but hopefully next year. We like to say, at Passover, we say next year in Jerusalem. For Interfaith Youth Shabbat, we can say next year in our sanctuary with donuts, and you're all welcome back. So thank you for being here. We're going to close with a blessing over our wine and our bread, and then words that say, we once again ask for peace to be brought to our world. So we thank all of you for coming. We ask you to please stand as we'll close our service.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, b'shabbat kodesho, be'ahava uvratzon, hinchilanu, zikaron lemasi, v'reishit. Ki hu yam techila lemikra kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim ki vanu v'charta v'yotanu kidashta mikamim v'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava uvratzon Hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
The only announcement is that Torah study is going to be virtual only for the next few months until Huey's bar mitzvah. So, Huey, you're the goalpost. You're the finish line there. So until Huey has his bar mitzvah, we're going to do Torah study virtually, and we'll close with the words Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Thank you to Eli for being our accompanist, and our cantor will lead us. And thank you to all our guests for joining us in all the ways that you did.
Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'akulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'akulam. Salam Aleinu ve'akulam. Salam, salam, salam Aleinu ve'akulam. Salam, salam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'akulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'akulam. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.